Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Two World Podcast. My name is Ken, and it's a really unique program today, not only because of our guest, which we'll introduce in a moment here, but when we say Two World Podcast, we are spanning 3 time zones today: Pacific and Eastern in America, and our co-host Barney is in Japan, so that's exciting as well. But more exciting than that, we are very honored to have a couple of authors with us this morning. And we have Lauraine Snelling and we have Kiersti Giron. I hope I have given that its due or gotten close. So, welcome to the Two World Podcast. And let me introduce to you our co host.
I am Barney.
Right. Okay. We look forward to hearing from both of you, particularly about the upcoming book to be released on April 1st, Land of Dreams. Barney?
Yeah. So, like Ken said, this is a very interesting and unique opportunity for us, especially the fact that we get to interview 2 authors today, that this book was written collaboratively. We're excited to find out more. And our one author, Lauraine, is well established with a multitude of books to her name, and then working with her is Kiersti, who is, it seems, is just getting launched into her writing career. And what an interesting dynamic that you must have, and I'm excited. We're both excited to learn more about. But I guess first of all, we should ask, how is it that this collaboration came about?
Well, our agent, Wendy Lawton, a few years ago said, "Lorraine, I think, we need to be thinking of someone working with you." And I thought, that never entered my mind. Of course, there's a lot of things in this business that haven't entered my mind until they got here. And so we thought about it, and she said, "No rush, but let's just be thinking about it." Well, then some life kind of took a change here, and so we decided that it was time to start looking. Well, it's not easy to find someone who can 2 people who can work together and nobody can tell the difference. That was, our big thing. Plus, we needed to do it so that we're filling she'd be filling in my hard places and being organized, and the things she does, that is the greatest gift she can give me besides writing with me.
Hmm.
And so we thought about a lot of people, and we needed somebody well organized and who knew me and knew my books. And so all of a sudden Kiersti's name popped up, and she fit in all of the criterion that we needed. And so when she said she was willing to do this, I was Wendy and I were both just beyond happy, because it has been such a God thing. I mean, Kiersti has just filled in all the blanks, has been able to keep going. She she can be in a discussion and be typing and keeping the notes at the same time, and types like a so it's just been a marvelous thing when we started working together. And I asked Wendy, I said, "Well, how are we going to do this?"
Hmm.
She said, "I don't know. I guess you'll find out." Okay, thanks, super duper agent. We're gonna be out on a limb here. But it has worked out really well, and are we 3 years now, Kiersti, or
We started in, like, August 2020, so we're going on 5, which is hard to believe.
obviously, that's a shocker. Yeah, that is amazing.
Wow.
But it's
So,
been such
so I guess I apologize. Then Land of Dreams is not your first collaboration, then. So you've been collaborating for almost 5 years. That's,
Yeah.
wow, impressive.
We worked together on Leah's Garden, which was the series before this,
Hmm.
Okay.
and then I was working on a book set, in Italy, mostly Italy and America, and she helped and worked with that, so she just ended up, let's ease in. Nope, didn't work that way. It was just all or nothing right from the very beginning. And for me, it's just been a lifesaver. And I don't know, Kirsty's coming so along so fast, and she just it fills in all the blanks.
Mm, mm.
Then I'm curious, Kiersti, how about from your point of view when you were first approached to start on this project, especially knowing exactly how substantial Lauraine's career was up until that time? What was the process like for you?
It's yeah, it's been amazing. I think at least the first year or 2, I just kept kind of pinching myself, like, "Am I actually writing with Lauraine Snelling?" Because, Lauraine knows this, I grew up loving her books. Like, as a teenager, we lived in rural New Mexico, my family, and there was this bookmobile that would come to the volunteer fire station across from us, and they happened to have a whole bunch of Lauraine Snelling books, especially the Red River of the North series, and that's how I discovered her books, and I just adored them and devoured them, and she was, one of my favorite authors, and the way we actually first met was way back in 2011 when I went to my first writers conference, and one thing that made me go there is I saw that Lorraine was leading this Head Start mentoring group for new writers, and I thought, "Oh my word, I could actually meet Lorraine Snelling." And that ended up being a really precious experience where the other women in the group, we all became critique partners and really bonded, so I first met Lorraine there, but then I never imagined I'd actually get to write with her, so although she, at that conference, introduced me to Wendy, who became my agent and is already Lorraine's agent, so God was putting the pieces together for many years, but it's just amazing how put that together, and, yeah, just getting to write with her and learn from her, she has so much wisdom and insight and experience, and her insights into characters and the way she takes stories just continues to amaze me and teach me.
Wow. Well, Lorraine, it brings to mind a question for me, the way Kiersti has talked about, your sort of mentoring and so on. When you were beginning to really consider a pathway as an author, were you pretty much on your own as you began to write, or was there someone that sort of mentored, inspired you?
Well, I had decided when I was a junior in high school that someday I was going to write horse books for girls. Loved horses all my life. I've had horses, and I love writing about them. And all of a sudden, God put his foot in the middle of my back and sent me to a writers' conference. I mean, it was just totally there. The stories that go into making stories are crazy making sometimes. And
Mm.
I went to a writers' conference, and a fiction teacher that I worked with there, at my second conference, I brought a chapter to be read, and she read that, and it just happened so fast, and I don't think it happens as easily today because there's so many more writers wanting to come into the
Sure,
business.
sure,
And but for me, that book became Tragedy on the Toutle because the Toutle River was where the ranch was, all of that. So that story found Baker Bookhouse was looking for adventure stories. I sent them the proposal. I just went down the query proposal down the list and did it. And they bought it. And I was just I mean, that's just not supposed to happen that way.
sure,
Everybody's
sure.
now be patient. It can be a long haul. Well, I know it can be, but I know God knows me well enough that if it hadn't happened fast, because I've always been a really good starter. I mean, many people are. We're really good starters, but when it comes to the finishing part, well, we get started on something else first. So that's kind of the way I just have to God makes me laugh a lot because he just puts things in place and makes it happen, and you're going, "Whoa, gee, that's really wonderful." But that book started it, and we was what did how did I feel? I held that book in my hand, and I I was absolutely in awe. I mean, I really wrote the book, and it got published, and it's out there, and we lived in the area in Vancouver, Washington, and that's when Mount St. Helens erupted, and so that became the basis for the first book, and it went on from there. From there, it just kept on going, and then I'd come up with another idea, and after Tragedy on the Tootle, and then there was another book, and the publisher bought that one, but then there was a whole long break in there, and because of life things that had gone on, our daughter died of cancer, and that put a big hold on a lot of things, and so when I went back to writing after a hiatus there, it's just been steady ever since,
Mm.
and I'm just really grateful. I I follow what people told me to do, which is not always my standard way of doing things. Pretty independent, so
Well, your readers are grateful too that you came back to it after that hiatus. Tough time, I'm sure.
Mm.
I'd be interesting, Kiersti, to interview you a number of years from now and to have you reflect and look back to this particular time or when you really started writing even prior to 2020 and see how see how those things felt because you're definitely living in a different generation, particularly compared to Lorraine and myself. That yeah, it really is different. Wow. Right.
And Kiersti, would you say that what the spark that brought you into writing, is it something similar? Was it a lot of people that we've talked to have said that from a very young age, even high school or even earlier, that they felt that this is something they really had a passion for. Does your personal story of getting into writing mirror Lorraine's as well, or how did yours come about?
Mm. A good question. I feel like there's so many pieces. I know when I was a little girl, my mom can tell you I used to walk around in circles telling myself stories. It's like in the living room or the front yard, just on and on. I didn't really realize that I loved writing till high school. That became more of a thing. I actually wrote my first like real stories that had any substance about like historical fiction about Scandinavian immigrants, probably inspired by Lorraine and my own family heritage. So, and then it wasn't till I think after college that a professor actually told me I needed to go to the Mount Herman Christian Writers Conference and like just about literally dragged me there, like drove me there. And and that was where I met Lorraine, but there was a screenplay from actually a college class that ended up becoming my first novel, and that was what also kind of prompted me to like, that's why I was in Lorraine's group working on that manuscript and that kind of thing. So
So you had
and
written a screenplay. Was it performed?
no, no, I was an English major, and it was a
Okay.
creative writing, drama, and film class, and we had to write, like, half of a screenplay, but
Mm.
the story just kind of took on a life of its own.
Sure. Sure. To kind of piggyback on Barney's question, I was a teacher. That was sort of my main profession, secondary schools here and there, and you taught for a while. How did that feel as a perhaps a career path, or was writing always there on the back, heading to the front burner going, "Yeah,
Mm.
Well, I'm actually still doing both. Like, I did teach high school for 5 years in person, and now I teach for an online international school. So I'm
Okay.
I'm very familiar actually with, like, working with different time zones. A lot of my classes are at 5 in the morning because I've got students in China and, you know, Africa and all over the place. So still writing and teaching, and I do enjoy it. I love helping students with writing along with doing my own, so
That's a full life. Very good.
The little boy that's 5 years old now, so
Yeah.
busy.
he keeps me busy probably more than anything else put together.
Bet.
Yeah, I when Ken and I were preparing for today's talk today, and then Ken pointed out that Kiersti had spent time or grew up near Navajo reservation. I was trying to imagine how it would be that your background and Lauraine's background, especially Lauraine often writing stories that deal with characters from Scandinavia or with roots or living in Norway and roots from Scandinavia, that I wondered if there would be much connection. But you mentioned earlier that your family as well has roots in Scandinavia. And so do you feel that collaborating together with these types of stories and these types of characters is it's a very smooth process? And do both of you, I'm wondering, where do you get your inspiration for these characters? Are they related to your families, or is it just mostly from research that you've done?
I'll let Lorraine take that one.
When when Kirsty and I started working together, we were able to brainstorm, and I think it's partly because we'd had the time in that class together.
Mhm.
But when it came time for her to be working here with me, the brainstorming has been online, in person. It's just we just click on so many things, and so and back and forth with we haven't used Zoom very much, but a lot on phone, and we just we'll outline, brainstorm and generally outline a book, and then as we're writing it, we go along and, okay, we're put kind of in blocks, chapters 1 through 5 and block it that way, and then we brainstorm even more as it gets more specific and what we're doing. And so we kind of choose characters. I'll do one character, she'll do another character, so those chapters are set, and it's just amazing to me over and over again how we'll be thinking along the same lines, and it's just and other people ask us, "Well, how do you do it?" Well, it's gotta be a God thing because
Mm,
how else would it work like this?
mm,
It's something very unusual, and I know I talk with other people who have a writing partner, and everybody does it differently, but this is what works for Kirsty and me, and so we're just starting the new series now, and so the first book is finished. We're editing the second book and brainstorming the third book. So then people ask us different questions, and it just happens. It works. So we can't say, "Well, I did this," because
mm.
it's a "we did this," and God's right in the middle.
That's for sure. The main character of this first book, she actually came to you in a dream. Isn't that right, Lorraine?
Pardon me?
The Amelia, the main character in this book, came to you first in a dream, right? That first
Did
scene?
I love that time in the early morning, well, not early for me, but where you're just almost awake, but I saw a woman standing on a ship railing and hearing the plop of her father's body being buried at sea. The ship had a cholera epidemic, and it just I didn't know anything more about it than that. And then this little girl came in, and so a lot of ideas come different. They come different ways, but this one came about by seeing this scene of on a rough sea and what all happened on boat, and this little girl that came, and she all of a sudden her parents died on the ship. Most of so many of the people died on that ship, and that kind of thing happened. And so always when I'm doing historical things, they're things that actually mostly they're things that actually happen,
Mm.
that I heard about, read about, thought about, whatever.
Sure. And that sort of, you've answered the question. You must have had a psychic occurrence as you were speaking, because I was thinking about the question of, in the book Land of Dreams, out April 1st, readers, grab that one. It is quite a story. Yeah, I was thinking that in the midst of your collaboration, we have Amelia on the boat, and these terrible things happen with cholera and death. So apparently, because of the vision you hadn't considered, let's let Amelia's parents live, and then let's have the story go from there, and dealing with little Ruthie, who Amelia took guardianship over. But it seems like that was pretty well set and didn't require a lot of collaboration. Is that,
Yeah, it was there, and I told Kiersti about it, and we went on from there. We changed things where because I had originally thought we would well, I didn't know when I started seeing her of all the stuff that had already gone on. So, as we talked about it, more and more of it came about, and we were able
Mhm.
to begin writing this story.
And that sort of reminds me of your author's letter, which I thought was really a uniquely personal touch to tell us a little bit about the thought process as it went on. I believe you said it was going to be set in northern Minnesota, but or in Minnesota, and then you decided on an Iowa setting. How did that process work?
I hadn't said anything in Iowa yet, and I try and we try to move things around so that it's in more states, because so many of my books are in North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, in that upper area. So this one, I hadn't said anything in Iowa, and I'd been there, and it helps when I it helps when you've been there to be able to set a book there.
Mm.
And so I had been there, and away we went.
And Decorah had a big Norwegian immigrant population at that time, so still a big Norwegian influence.
Mm.
It's so fascinating to hear the story of Amalia, how she came about. How about one of the other main characters in being Zelda? How is it that she came about, and was she written from both of your perspectives, or did one of you take on her writing her part of the story more than the other, or?
Go, Christy.
I'm trying to remember. I told Lauraine when we got to meet up in person last week, which was a real treat, that even sometimes when I'm revising and editing, I forget who wrote which part, which is funny. I think it was very much collaborative. Like Lauraine had the idea of her, but then I wrote some of her scenes, and she just kind of came together. Ended up being quite a force in the story. We didn't like her very much, but she was an important character.
I
Yeah.
always have problems getting evil,
Yeah.
getting that kind of conflict in a book, because I want everybody to be happy.
Mm.
I mean, my way in life, I just want everybody to be happy, and so getting the conflict in there, and so between us, she turned into quite a character.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
like no, she's not likable, and now
Right.
we don't know what we're gonna do with her yet either. She got kicked
Interesting.
out, but who knows? 'Cause somebody invariably is gonna, "Well, why didn't you tell us more about Zelda?" "Well, because I don't like her." I mean, it's easier to write characters that you like.
Yeah.
She may be back at some point, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. And I got a sense of you do like things to be happy, and there was so much goodness in the book. It was just really heartwarming. I love the character of Hank, and I'll show a little bit of my ignorance here. Right about the middle of the book, you mentioned that Hank had come on an orphan train. Now, as of 6 months ago, I had no idea what an orphan train was. But
Ah,
luckily, in a little book club we have here, we read a book about orphan trains, semi-factual, and that really helped. I'm very curious, without giving having y'all give a bunch of spoilers. Can you address a little bit about where Hank goes after this book?
so we're gonna we're well, he doesn't wanna go to school,
Sure.
yeah, so that's part of the problem. He's a he's such a sharp kid, and it's gonna be interesting to watch him grow up
Okay.
through the rest of the series because
Yeah.
he's very opinionated, and we all know that as you read this book. He's very opinionated, and he's just a fun character.
Mhm. Artistic ability as well. Yeah, just
Mm.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah, appreciate that character. That was
Well, I mean, originally when I didn't realize that this was going to become an orphanage, when I saw Amelia standing on the edge on the boat, I had no idea at that point in time where all it was going. It was think it out after that. That was just the opening scene.
Yeah, I'm curious with the topic of the book and a lot of the first part of it taking place on the boat of the people immigrating into the US and then having to spend time on the boat even after arriving to make sure that everyone who gets off will be healthy enough. Do you feel that the climate now in the US as you're writing these books, are you writing in a way to kind of tell tell your tell your own outlook on, kind of reminding us of how history was? Or is it just that and like kind of trying to comment a bit on how things have become now these days? Or is it just that you wanted to write this particular story and just to keep in line with your your love for historical fiction?
I think I'm having trouble hearing that, so would
I sorry, go ahead, Lorraine.
go.
I know Lorraine has always written immigrant stories, that's her family heritage and that of, most of us in America, so I think it wasn't like an
Mm.
intentional choice to shift and do anything different.
Mhm.
But I know for me, like, sharing quotes from the book on social media right now and such, and thinking about Amelia and Ruthie in this, such a vulnerable position in this new land is certainly poignant right now with immigration in the spotlight. And yeah, it's good to remember
Mm.
where we came from and just our immigrant history and how that's still relevant today for me. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Lorraine, but I know immigrant stories have always been the heartbeat of your
Mm.
book.
It caused well, everything with me starts with a question, and I'm very curious, and I'm wishing I had asked my family a whole lot more questions than I did. but because of having my family came from Norway, and I'm what, second generation here. My mom was both my mom and dad were born here. Their parents were both born were in Norway. But it became I had written all the horse books, the 2 series of horse books for kids, and I was so curious what happened, about to people who came. I mean, I just because I have that background, I wanted to know more, and I started putting together a proposal, which is the practice, and Bethany House took that. They had published Baker had published my children's books, and they agreed to do a series with, people coming from Norway, and that began this whole thing. I had no idea, no dreams of doing all that. I just was curious, and so to get my curiosity bump happy, I started just asking, well, I was asking my family, but asking other people what they knew and what had gone on, and that started it, and they said 2 books, and then it's kept on going, and pretty soon there were 6 books in that series, and then they wanted more, and so there was 3 books in the next part of that series, and it ended up that there's 22 books in the Red River of the North series, and most people call it the Blessing series. And Ingeborg has just become people ask me often, "Well, who is Ingeborg?" Well, she's a combination of my mom and her sister,
Mm.
2 in my 2 of my hero women,
Mm.
and it began and it kept on going, and whoever dreamed that it would? I mean, this is just amazing. I'm, constantly amazed in this whole thing. But once we decided we needed to go other places,
Mm.
started going other places and setting more books in that place.
I'm I'm so glad that you mentioned Ingeborg. After I finished The Promise of Dawn and then read in your author's note that it was a continuation of the first of the 6 books prior to that, then I immediately got my hands on An Untamed Heart. Is that the first one? And
Well, that was An Untamed Heart. The first one started out as An Untamed Land,
oh,
and there were 6 in that series, and people kept asking me, "Well, what happened to her life in Norway? What went on?" Well, I kept hoping that I was gonna get to go to Norway, and I couldn't, but for some reason, but I have a lot of friends in Norway, and so we wrote a new first book for the series. So, An Untamed Land was the first book for years, and then An Untamed Heart became the first book, and it takes people back to Norway and what was going on there.
Okay. I I get the sense, Lorraine, that part of the research for you was effectively talking to people
mm.
and getting their view on past generations and so on. Would either of you care to address any other outside research that went on for Land of Dreams, or was it the fertile minds that really produced
Mm.
this wonderful story?
You want to take that, Lorraine, or you want me to?
I I love traveling,
Okay.
and I always meet such interesting people, and that's part of where a good part for me where the research comes, and
Right.
if I haven't been there, I have a much harder time writing the book, but so far, I've been to everywhere but Norway, and that I had friends in Norway who read the book before it came, before when I was writing it, and caught the places that I messed up.
Mhm.
And that's my favorite kind of research. To and to I begin the writing, and then I do the research as I go along and find out what I need. And that's where Kiersti's been so wonderful, because she just goes on and finds out all kinds of information online, and much better at that, much better at that than I am. And so that's another one of those places where we really balance and help each other.
I was thinking that our research since I started working with you has been a combination of, as you have so much hands-on knowledge from all of your research over the years and just from growing up on a farm without electricity and such. So Lorraine's always having to correct my farming things like, no, they wouldn't bring the horses in this time of year. That's, that's not how you feed the chickens and things like that. I did have some experience in New Mexico raising goats and things, but not cows and chickens. And so but then there'll be, she'll have a question and I'll be able to find it online and kind of fill in the little gaps. So we do complement each other pretty well, I think.
You
Just
do. It's great that
another God thing.
Mhm.
Good.
And I love talking with people, and so I ask them questions, and so many things that come up in the books are because somebody told me a story from their one of their family stories. And family stories are just I I I try to get everybody to write their family story or talk it or do whatever, because someday somebody in their family is going to wanna know what went on. And the one in Untamed, this one, I wanted to call it the Rutabaga series, because that's where it's based on a story of my grandmother and the Rutabaga years. And so we didn't do that, but that's where this one came from, was grandma's Rutabaga years.
Hmm.
You never know. You
No, you
just
don't.
know.
No.
I'm wondering a little bit more about, especially Lorraine, as you look back on this really long career that you've had, and then again, if you don't mind me mentioning at the start of the promise of Dawn, you mentioned your long work with your editor and friend Sharon Asmus. And I wonder how has, like, the behind the scenes and, the nitty-gritty of writing, and especially someone looking at your work and like you said, like, pointing out, how things that might need to be fixed, and how has this kind of relationship and your outlook on these things, how has it changed and matured over the years? And then Kiersti, how does it how does it help for you to have someone to work with like Lorraine to help you understand, the entire process that goes into writing, and then maybe kind of, dealing with some of the tough days, or the days where the ideas just aren't coming, and to look to her wisdom, and, gaining from all of her experience.
You ask, how have things changed?
Mhm.
My first book was written on a little typewriter, portable typewriter, and you had to pound the keys, and I have never been a good typist, and so they wanted pages with no mistakes. So I had to I wrote it on that, and some by hand, but mostly on that, and then an electrical typewriter was a big wow. I mean, I got that, and so, but as the business changes nowadays, it's a totally different world than when I started writing. Just totally different. Other than a good story's a good story, and let's get it out there. But when a computer came along, wow! And it had a delete key, and I was in heaven. Man, and it was that big old clunker computer that I had just saved my life because when I started, I had to write with a carbon copy so that I mean, it is a whole different world.
Yeah.
And manuscripts had to be mailed in, printed out, the copy mailed in and all of that, and I was always down to the last minute, and so where we are today with computers and all the things that we're doing and, like, what we're doing right now just has been such an adventure. That's all you can call it, is an adventure. And so I've got all these years of adventuring in, and made good friends with people all over, and I did a lot of been doing a lot of public speaking along with it, and it's been a it's been a joy and delight, and my husband and I got to travel and do a lot of fun things that we wouldn't have gotten to do otherwise, so it was marvelous.
Wonderful.
Yep,
Yeah, I'd
and
say
so
next next to the delete key, the undo key. Genius.
yes. No more cutting a page
Oh,
apart
yeah.
and none of that. People have no idea that today's writers have no idea what it used to be like. And this is where Kiersti she's so good on the computer
Mm.
and she makes sure I'm working right.
You make me feel very spoiled when I hear all of these stories.
That's
But I certainly No, sorry, go ahead, Lauraine. No, I've learned so much just about, like you said, kind of the behind the scenes process through working with Lauraine and getting to, communicate with editors and things, and just learning all the different rounds of edits, all the stages, what galleys are, and learning to work to an actual deadline and, like you said, right, even when you really don't feel like it, and that kind of thing has been just such a blessing. I feel like it's been as I get closer to hopefully launching some of my own books, I feel like most writers don't have that kind of gentle transition where you're learning those things, but all the pressure isn't on you, and having someone to work with like Lauraine is just incredible. She's such a master. So, yeah,
And we have fun.
we do. Lots
and
of
that's
laughs
right.
on the phone.
If there is no fun,
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
what's the point? Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both again for Barney and I talk about this all the time. Not only did we learn a lot today,
Mm.
it has been fun, and we appreciate you for that. What a joy this has been for me. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you
for
both.
inviting us. This has
Yeah.
been a delight, and looking forward to talking to you again sometime.
That would be great.
Mhm. Yeah. Before we do close, Lauraine or Kiersti, was there anything that you wanted to mention before we bring today to a close?
Before what?
Before we close today's show, is there anything else you would like to mention?
To me, it's interesting that the people that are promoting writing and promoting books and doing this kind of thing for authors, because I talk to so many people and so many new authors, and there's so well, I can't blow my own horn. I mean, I'd sound like I'm bragging. That kind of thing is really difficult for new writers, and I run been there, done that, and so when there are people like you decide to come along and promote us and make it easier for new readers to find new writers, I just really appreciate that, and thank you very much, and look forward to maybe doing this again.
Very
Really good point.
gracious.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I think for Ken and I, the honor is all ours. I completely agree with Kiersti's story way early on that Lauraine Snelling's work and now Lauraine and Kiersti's work together, it's something that you just devour. Like the strong characters, the terrible evil, the conflict that comes in through some of these books, but it just leaves you wanting more. And so for Ken and I, we can't emphasize enough how much that all of you out there listening should, if you haven't yet, please give Lorraine's books a try, and then look forward to Kiersti's own books coming out one day. And speaking of books coming out, Land of Dreams will be out on April 1st, and it's the start of a new
Almost here.
I know, very, very close. And the start of a new series, so this chance to get in on the ground floor of this one, as it were, and then you'll probably find yourself, as me, wanting to go back and read all of the other books that have already taken place. So and we would like to emphasize that Lauraine Snelling has, and Kiersti as well, they have you can find them online. You can interact with them in that way. Just like in easy search. They have very nice websites. And it has been, again, a true honor and a great time to have you here today on the Two World Podcast. And so for my co-host Ken, I am Barney. Today we spoke with Lauraine Snelling and Kiersti Giron. And we will see you all again next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Blessings on your day and every day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Amen.
Yes.